wrote a lovely little note, and I'm going to share it with you verbatim because I don't think I can improve on it. Jane Faily comes from a wonderful family. Her mother, Catherine Lang of Janesville, Michigan, was the first Baha'i in her family. Catherine Lang married Yahya Faily from Tehran, Iran, an agnostic from a Muslim family, about 10 years before she became a Baha'i. He became a Baha'i 16 years later. Jane's sister, Joy Benson, is that correct, Jane? Joy, thank you, I wasn't sure. Joy Benson pioneered to South Carolina in 1956 to make the first local spiritual assembly in that state. All Dr. Faily's services to the cause are a reflection of the devotion and courage of her family. Dr. Jane Faily.
I have an announcement also. I would like to trade with one of the people who got a blank Jane Faily tape. I would prefer that to the one I have that is full of these gross noises. Well, friends, I really did come from a wonderful family. To have parents from the East and the West, such different cultures and such outstanding individuals. You know, you think of the land of Iran and you think of television screens full of shouting and outrageously revolutionary people. And you think of the Midwest and you think of people mowing their lawns and clipping their shrubs and voting that the United States not become a member of the League of Nations, a conservative and stable group. Now, something happened in the case of my parents. My mother was a small, cameo-faced lady with big blue eyes from a very conservative family. And after she heard of the faith, a certain unexpected element emerged in her personality. She would go down to the local grocery store to ask if she could put a Baha'i poster in the window. Then we lived in the small town of Ypsilanti, Michigan, where people thought New York was a foreign country. And then Mrs. Faily would come in and say, "Would you mind if I could just put a poster in your window?" And this Congregationalist, who knew everybody was going to hell, who hadn't contributed sufficiently at last Sunday's offering, would say, "What is it about?" She would say, "This is a new religion. Baha'u'llah has come. The world will be changed. Look." And it would say, "Louis Gregory is coming to speak, and his topic is, soon will the present day order be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead." And this quivering man trying to somehow connect this diminutive little woman with this revolutionary doctrine would say, yes, put it up just by the onions. Something like that. She used to read us stories. We used to say, "Please read us the story about Abdu'l-Baha giving candy to the children." She would say, "No, I like the one about Mullah Hussein, who with his sword went through the man, the tree, and the gun." She really did have spirit. She pioneered from Michigan to South Carolina to Dominica. Dominica is so hot. I went to visit her one time. We went to catch the bus, and we waited for 10 minutes. It was so hot, we went back home. We couldn't stand it. I don't know, she was there 3 or 4 years until a very bad hurricane came and she had to be evacuated, and the NSA wrote us and said, "Please this place is really too hard for your mother. She doesn't know it, but send her to a better climate. She's now a pioneer in Bermuda. Now, my father, 81 years old, my father, from this revolutionary culture of passionate, fanatic Shiite Muslims, he had a beautiful temperament. People used to say to me, "You don't speak Persian? Your father was Persian. You don't speak Persian." There's also a language of the heart. And I remember when my father's friends used to come and visit, and they would laugh. They would laugh about Americans who, my father used to say, they say, "Hi, John, how's business?" And then all these people would laugh. And they said, they don't say to you, "How are you? How is your mother? How is your wife? Are you happy?" They say, "How's business? The most unimportant thing in your life." And he had a tranquil temperament. When I was learning to drive, I was drunk with power and arrogance. A condition which the fellow members of my NSA in Canada say has become chronic. And I turned from a Howard Johnson's into a two-lane expressway in which the cars were all coming towards us. And my father said to me, "Janie, do you think you're in the right lane?" Now imagine this poor man. He had a beautiful mind. I think the people who taught him the faith, my mother was too revolutionary for him. He had just gotten away from fanatics. And she was too revolutionary for him, but Dorothy Baker and Marcia Gale and Robert Gaines, who's a wonderful Baha'i who has passed away recently, they taught him the faith. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man with all the subtlety and beauty of character of the Persian people. And he taught me English, and he taught me a great deal about spirit. Now, I remember, if you think you're mixed up in the age of transition, here are these two opposite cultures merging around the non-existent problem of child discipline. And we just grew, we kids. I went to Greenacre one time, and I met Ken Kallentar, and he said, "You know, Persian Americans are the best people in the world," that combination. He had it all worked out. Anyway, our teacher that year said that Baha'u'llah has come to create unity. Unity of all cultures. This was Mehdi Feruzi. "Do you think it's easy?" So we, the North American youth of that time, said, "Sure. People are the same all over, right? I read it in Reader's Digest." "No," said Mr. Feruzi, "no, it is the most difficult thing in the world. I will give you an example of just two cultures. Here is the culture of Iran. It has learned hospitality from the teachings of Muhammad. When you go visit a friend, you first go and buy a gift that is more expensive than you can afford. You wrap it in silk. You knock at the door of your friend. He opens it. You come in. You set the gift down in an inconspicuous place. He says, "What is this? You've brought me a gift." You say, "Oh, no, it's nothing. It's not worthy of your eyes." He says, "This is something beautiful." "No, please don't mention it. I'm ashamed." He opens the silk. It's a carved rosewood box. He realizes you won't be eating for 3 weeks. He said, "This is gorgeous." You say, "Please don't mention it. It's too terrible." This is Iran. If someone says, "I like your sweater," you say, "Take it." I said to my father, "Why do they say that?" He said, "They say it to show you that your friendship, that a moment of joy in your heart is worth more to them than anything they own." Then there's the American culture. You're driving to see your friend. You say, oh my Lord, it's his birthday. Let's go to a discount house. You go and you look around to see what is going to look as though it's more expensive than it was. That's the camera you buy. You tell the fellow to wrap it for you. You go to your friend's house. You knock at the door. He opens the door. You say, look, I got you a terrific present. All that humility and reverence that is so characteristic of the United States. Now, friends, I want to speak about the message to the peoples of the world because we are among those peoples. And to mention that basically this is a message of hope. And it is a message of hope because the times we live in bring us all to despair. We don't see kindness. We don't see nobility in our statesmen. We don't see growth, love, all the things that bring hope to the human heart. This message gives us a logic of hope. Baha'u'llah gives us a command of hope, but we will be tested. Abdu'l-Baha said the tests of North America will be mental tests. The believers in Iran will be executed and tortured and persecuted, and we will be tested mentally. They are being persecuted and tortured and executed, and our danger is that we should not realize that we are likewise being tested. The Guardian wrote to North America in the last message before he died, beware lest timidity, apathy, and complacency rob you of the prizes within your reach. Timidity, apathy, that means deadness. Complacency. I went to the feasts, they're dull, but look how faithful I am. I went. So our tests are mental tests, and we are in danger of not knowing that we are immersed in them. They are the tests which deaden the heart, blind the eye to the opportunity of sacrifice. Now, how do they come? You know, they come with a sense of meaninglessness and futility. You imagine Tahirah, the greatest poetess of Iran, so eloquent, so full of audacity. We know the story of her martyrdom. She's taken from the house of a mayor, walked to the outside of the city, small group of drunken soldiers. They probably can't write. They never heard a poem. They stuff her scarf down her throat, throw her in a pit. It's over. If you looked at that with the eye of the non-believer, her sentence before she died, you can kill me as soon as you wish, but you can never stop the emancipation of women, that would be pathetic. But is it true? Does God honor his promises? At the first United Nations Conference on the Emancipation of Women, Princess Ashraf of Iran was there, dripping with oil money, panting with the desire to be recognized by the world. Into its deliberations one day, she said, I give you $1 million to found a research center for the emancipation of women. And on the fourth day, she said, I give you another $1 million to strengthen and support that research center for the emancipation of women. And the Baha'is in the audience wept because it was the power of Tahirah moving through that culture, recording for history. You can kill me as soon as you like, but you can never stop the emancipation of women. My friends, it is not only the dawnbreakers. In the Igan, Baha'u'llah repeats from the Quran that sentence which Muhammad said to people who no longer believed in the power of God to intervene in human affairs. Do you think the hand of God is chained up? We should ask ourselves, do we believe the power that worked through the dawnbreakers is not going to help us? You know, my sister, I used to be so proud of her. I thought she was the most wonderful thing in the world, and she is pretty wonderful. She went from Michigan to South Carolina in 1956. She was an intern. She'd just finished medical school. And she began to do the things in Baha'i administration, like invite black people to her home. And when she went on rounds in the hospital, to call him Mr. Jones. And the Baha'is were all upset. They called the NSA and they said, this young woman doesn't know what she's doing. She's going to get us all in trouble. Matthew Bullock came down to investigate. The other people in town didn't like it all that well either. She was asked to leave her residency. She wanted to be a pediatrician. And the John Birch Society said that she was a communist because obviously no ordinary person would have black people in their home during this time, especially someone who wasn't that wealthy. There wasn't that much furniture in the house, and so it must be supported from somewhere else. And then she started having babies, and the family was sort of financially and socially ostracized. She told me one time she was hanging, she had 4 children. She was hanging the diapers on a clothesline, and it had been a particularly bleak week. And the clothesline broke, and all the stuff fell into the beautiful red clay of South Carolina. And she said, please, Baha'u'llah, let this count. Well, I think she never felt that she had really done enough. She never felt that if she had been able to live what the Guardian wanted the Baha'is in the South to live, then the black people would have come in earlier. Now, an interesting thing happened. This year was the 75th anniversary of Abdu'l-Baha's visit in America. And the Baha'is of the United States wanted so much to have our Secretary, Robert Henderson, address the NAACP because Abdu'l-Baha had addressed them. So they approached the NAACP, and they were told, no, next year is an election year. Everybody in the world wanted to address the NAACP and be sure that they were in the right pocket and so on. So no, go away, pray or something that you're good at. And so Bob Henderson called Smitty, William Smith, who had been Baha'i in Greenville, South Carolina, where my sister was, and said, don't you know the president of the NAACP? I think his name is Bob Gibson. I probably shouldn't be saying all these names on the tape. Well, I hope this one will be blank, too. Anyway, Smitty called Bob, and the president of the NAACP said, you can speak. When I was 18 in Greenville, South Carolina, I had never been in a white person's home. And you took me to the home of Joy Benson, and it was as though I was in my own family. Come and speak to the NAACP. And I say that because it shows you the small deeds we do, the poverty, the times when we feel we are not successful, those deeds will be blessed by Baha'u'llah. They will become the means for the awakening of the peoples if we have faith. We have to have hope. You know, I'm interested in the representatives of the Institution of the Learned who are with us this weekend because I never met Morris Taylor before. I've been haunted by Bob Harris during my Baha'i life. But they remind me of a pioneer. There was a very fine tailor. He was a tremendous, accomplished man who went as a pioneer to Africa. He was Persian, so he went in this great cloud of love because the Guardian wanted people to go there. And he said, after all, if you're a tailor, you can work anywhere. He got there, and the people wore no clothes. He wrote back, and he said, never mind, I have become a photographer. Now, I say any people in the world who have Bob Harris as a counselor, as a member of the Institution of the Learned, know the power of Baha'u'llah. If we don't have hope, we're just crazy. The theme of the covenant is extremely meaningful to me because I tend to be cowardly. When Marguerite Sears returned from her pilgrimage, she went, I think, in 1951 or 2, and she said that the Guardian talked to her with urgency. And he said the times are going to become much, much worse. The winds of storms in the world will reach hurricane proportions. The faith of the Baha'i for one day will not be sufficient for the next day. Your roots have to go deeper and deeper. In the future, the tests will be great, and many believers will be blown away in that hurricane veil. Now, for people who deepen, the Guardian said, you will be in the very eye of the hurricane, calm, serene, protected. The covenant is that promise from God to mankind, from Baha'u'llah to his followers, to Abdu'l-Baha, the Guardian, and the Universal House of Justice. That covenant says the time has come when the power of God will purge the earth of every form of evil. The process of that purging is testing. It was Baha'u'llah's half-brother who broke the covenant of the Bab. It was Abdu'l-Baha's half-brothers who broke the covenant of Abdu'l-Baha. It was the family of Shoghi Effendi mentioned in Abdu'l-Baha's will and testament, the Agsan and the Afnan, who were called to serve him. They broke the covenant. And in the time of the hands of the cause of God, it was Mason Remy, resident in the Holy Land, who became a covenant breaker. This is to show us it can happen to anyone. This is to show us that the covenant is an individual connection between our own heart and the power of Baha'u'llah. And we have Marguerite Sears' notes to tell us there will be great tests. So the theme of the covenant means, in the United States, there will be mental tests. There will be timidity, apathy, complacency. There will be problems of unity. And this is meant to be. Now, in 1983, the message from the House of Justice said this twofold process, this battle between the forces of light and darkness, is raging, is reaching a crisis point within and without the faith of God. Abdu'l-Baha is the center of the covenant. What does his tablet of visitation say? Help me to be detached from all things within thy holy precincts. The testing of the world is not the testing of those people who haven't declared in Baha'u'llah yet. It is all of us. And I always think the testing happens in 3 circles. The biggest circle is the world. It is the collapse of economies. It's the crisis of racial tension. It's the bizarre pollution of the atmosphere. Is it testing? Is there calamity? The next circle is the circle of the Baha'i community. It was tested by Subi Azel. It was tested by Muhammad Ali. It was tested by Mason Remy. Do we think that's over? Within our institutions, the old habits are going to be tested just like nationalism are. The Guardian said that Baha'i unity is not like the superficial fellowship of a church. That's in Baha'i administration. That's one of the things my sister read. The believers said to her, look, we'll all get together black and white at the feast. What are you inviting black people to dinner for? You don't have to do that. She'll open the book. It said, let everyone, old or young, in whatever state they reside, in their hours of recreation. So she said, I think I'm supposed to do this. When our feast is like a church, when we smile at the single parent and say, how are you? And never think of inviting the family to dinner or, this is superficial church fellowship. Sorry, it's not going to work for the Baptists. It's not going to work for us either. Has to be much deeper than that. And that's what, even though he's Bob Harris's auxiliary board member, I did agree with what Mr. Taylor said about the black people who come out of a living community that protect them when they're sick and when they're dying and when their kids are born. The Baha'i community has got to get closer because we need each other now. Now that inner circle, there's the world, there's the Baha'i community. The inner circle is your heart and my heart. And it's a funny mixture of stuff. In mine, there's Tahira and there's Goldie Hawn. Which one would I really like to be? There's timidity. Bob will be relieved to hear that. All he ever sees is aggression. There is timidity. There's apathy. There's complacency. There are old habits. And these are all going to be tested. And we will have to fight a daily battle against despair. We are living in the calamity. I know you're going to call me Calamity Jane after this. But we are in it. Family relationships are shredded. Integrity is a real disadvantage in the world of work. It is very hard to live in a materialistic culture and to exemplify the faith, the love, the radiance of a Baha'i. It's not hard, it's impossible unless we pray, we read the verses, we bring life and love to the feasts, We can work in that outside world in a spirit of service, which Baha'u'llah will transform into the spiritual power to recreate this world. If we do these things in a daily way, we will have hope. Wanted to pioneer or sacrifice for the fund, what you could do is say your daily obligatory prayer, go to the feast, and backbite less than you would really like to. And then one day, somebody would say something that would inspire you to really be a Baha'i and go to heaven. So I spent a lot of time in limbo, and unfortunately I went to a course at Greenacre. And in some answered questions, our teacher pointed out that Abdu'l-Baha said there is a material nature and a spiritual nature. Either your deeds and actions and behavior is governed by your material side, or it's governed by your spiritual side. I almost fainted. What happened to neutral? You know, this time that I wasn't being spiritual, most of the time, the short obligatory prayer was about 5 seconds. All the rest of that time was material. Can't afford it anymore. The world conditions are pressing on us. The internal experience of that within the Baha'i community is pressing on us. We have to open our souls to the needing, the tumult of our own individual hearts in order to hold on to the covenant. If we don't, we will be asleep. Well, there is a message of hope. You know, I used to get discouraged. In the good old days, when I was in the South, I really thought I knew all the answers. And I was giving this talk about harmony and union between the black and white, and people were staring at me, and I was really downhearted because I knew they didn't get it. I had figured it all out. I'd driven about 200 miles to tell them, and they just didn't get it. And with me on the program was Eulalia Bobo, Joe Lewis's sister, who had driven from California. So at the end of the meeting, I said, "Oh, Eulalia, it's no use. They really don't get it. The black people are so beaten down. They don't say anything. The white people are so stuffy. Blech, blech, blech. I'm discouraged." Eulalia said, "You're discouraged?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh." She said, "You know, did you ever think about Abdu'l-Baha on the boat just as it was pulling out of New York?" She said, "He could have said, 'Goodbye, goodbye, you crazy people.'" Some of you think I'm the return of Christ. Some of you think a grape diet will get you to the Abha kingdom. You never recognize Mohammed. You spend your time backbiting. Goodbye. "No," she said. He went back to the Holy Land, and he wrote the tablets of the divine plan. He summoned the American believers out of racial prejudice, administrative decadence, materialism, to be those people who would go out around the world and establish the faith of God. And Shoghi Effendi called upon them to be the Knights of Baha'u'llah. And in place of the family of the guardian at his supper table at the end of his life sat Ruhia Khanum, Leroy Ayos, Amelia Collins, and Mr. Faily, and Mr. Samandari. they didn't give up hope on who we were. So you see, it's not our human eye that knows who we are. It's not my eyes when I look in the mirror and say, really do have to diet. Or I say, what can a mixed up half Persian, half American living in Canada really accomplish here? You have your own ideas of your weaknesses and frailties. And if we looked at each other with our human eye, we would miss the glory that is possible. So I'd like to close by telling us what Baha'u'llah saw. Baha'u'llah said, "We are possessed of such power which, if brought to light, will transmute the most deadly of poisons into a panacea of unfailing efficacy." The Baha'i community is destined to take the racism of North America, the materialism, its timidity, apathy, and complacency, those deadly poisons, and first in the crucible of our own heart, as we pray, as we connect ourselves to the covenant, change those base metals into purest gold. And then the Baha'i community, in its community life, is to work through those crazy incongruities between Persian and American culture, black and white, the Indian people who love the earth and the rest of us who kick it around and pollute it. Change that into unity. And finally, Baha'u'llah says to us, and the Guardian quotes it in Advent of Divine Justice. He says, Shoghi Effendi writes, "What more can I do, eager as I am, to render to you any assistance within my power, but to offer you these excerpts from the writings of Baha'u'llah." And the first one, the melody of that nightingale who has come to woo us out of our sleep of heedlessness, says this: "O friends, be not careless of the virtues with which ye have been endowed, neither be neglectful of your high destiny. Ye are the stars of the heaven of understanding, the breeze that bloweth at the break of day, the soft flowing waters, upon whom must depend the very life of all men."
Thank you again, Dr. Faily.